So this one we're going to be looking at how we can write to a Google Sheet, how we can select the sheet that we want to write with and write to using the active sheet, and then setting the range, selecting the range, and then having that range be dynamic enough that we're adding the new data to the end of the sheet, the current sheet values. Let's go ahead and create a function that we can write data into our Google Sheet, and we'll just call it writeData. And we'll create some data that we're going to add to the spreadsheet. So this is going to be a bound script, and we can add it directly within the sheet. And we'll create a brand new sheet. So we'll have two different sheets there, so as sheet 2. And I'll show you how you can select a specific sheet to write into. So first off, we need to use the sheet, the spreadsheet app service, and select whatever the active sheet is. So spreadsheet app, and then get the active sheet. So this is going to select the sheet object. And then we need to have some data that we want to write into the spreadsheet. And this is going to be contained within an array. It's going to have another array within it. So each one of the items within the main array is going to be a new row of content. So what you do is you create the main array, and then each one of these will be a row of content, and then these can hold string values. And I'll just set up a couple here where they're going to have a name and ID. So this is going to be the first row, and this is going to be its own array. And then the additional arrays of data, they'll have some information. So those are also going to be arrays. And then the first item is going to be my name. And then let's give an ID value. And you can create multiple items there, and each one of these, it's going to be its own separate row. And I'll just do some quick updates so that they're distinct. So we've got different values within the rows. So now we've got the data that we want to use, and we want to determine, and we want to add it into wherever the last row of data is. So right now we don't have any rows of data, but we need a starting point to where we want to add the row data. So selecting out whatever the last row is, select the sheet object, and then get the last row. And it's going to return back a numeric value. So you can see that within the logger as we output that and run the function. And I've already accepted permissions. So we see that the first row is just going to have a value of 0. Let's run it again. And now it's going to have a value of 1. And that's getting the index value of the items within the row. So we're going to have to add a 1 to that in order to have it match with what the row values are. So starting out as indexes and arrays are 0 based, so is that selection process when we're getting the last row. So what we want to do is we want to add to that value a 1 so that we're starting on the next available row of data. In order to write data into the sheet, we select the sheet object, and we need a range. So we're just using the function getRange, and this is going to be the range we're writing into, and the starting area we're writing into is going to be whatever the last row value is plus 1, so that we get to move to the next row. And then this is going to represent the column that we want to write to. We want to start it writing within the first column. And then the data length is going to determine how many rows of content that we're writing. And in this case, we're going to be writing 3 rows of content or 4 rows of content. And that's going to be returned back within the data length. And then we want to get the number of columns as well. And we can get that information from any one of the rows. So selecting out the data 0, which is going to be the first row, and that's going to represent the length of the items. So it's going to write to that much length. And you can set this as a range. And then once you're ready to write, use the setValues method and make sure your data is structured properly to be able to write into the rows so that we've got the right amount of data here, and we're setting up that each one of those has 2 columns. And then once we've checked that, let's run it and we'll see what happens. So we can go back and we can see that the data has been written. So what happens if we shift to sheet number 1 and we write it, we run it? That's going to automatically add it into whatever the active sheet is. You can also specify, so if you want to add the content into a specific sheet, then instead of getting the active sheet, let's select the spreadsheet object, and then we'll create the sheet from there. So using the spreadsheet app, get active spreadsheet, so it's going to return back the spreadsheet object, which is different than the sheet itself, because this is returning back the entire object. And then we want to select for the sheet itself, using the spreadsheet object, we can get sheet by name, and that's if we know the name of the sheet. In this case, it's called sheet 2. So now we can select sheet 2. And there's actually a number of ways that we can get it. So even if we're opened on sheet 1, if we run the script, it's going to automatically add it into the next available, or the sheet 2, but by using its name. There's also a way to select it using the order of the sheets. So we can select the sheet object, and then using the get sheets is going to return back an array of sheets. So maybe we call this sheets, and then in order to get a particular sheet, to get the sheet object, we can use the sheets as an array, and if we want to add it to the second value that's within the index of the array, then we can do it this way. So now we're defining sheet coming from the get sheets array. So let's try that again, and there's the 2 sheets that we have, and once again it's able to add it into the sheet. And this way we can also switch it. We don't need the name of the sheet, we know just the index value. So the sheet order, now when we run it, it's dropping it into sheet number 3. So what happens if we change the order of the sheets? And now we run it, and it's going to select whatever the current active sheet, the third one, is. So starting at 0, 1, 2, using the index value, and then that's the sheet that's going to be defined as the sheet object. And then the rest of the process is the same, where it's just writing into the sheet.